Now, the latest from ITV News Meridian in the south.
Good evening, welcome to ITV News Meridian.
Tonight's headlines here in the south. Home at last, HMS Queen Elizabeth arrives in Portsmouth for the first time, the aircraft carrier that's a floating city.
And I was one of the few journalists allowed aboard this £3 billion ship, the biggest ever built for the Royal Navy.
At the break of dawn, a warm welcome from the thousands of people who got up very early to watch a piece of history.
It's amazing. I'm one of the ex-shipbuilders and it's so great to see her come back.
And a visit from the Prime Minister as she inspects the Royal Navy flagship. 7 years in the making, but is it money well spent?
Also tonight, on the eve of this year's A-level results, why more teenagers are choosing a different path to university. Good evening. The Royal Navy's new aircraft carrier, HMS Queen Elizabeth, is preparing to spend her first night in her new home of Portsmouth.
She arrived at first light this morning with thousands of people setting their alarms extra early so they could be there to get a first glimpse of the carrier, the flagship of the Royal Navy.
And here's how she looks tonight. This our live camera at the top of the Spinnaker Tower, looking down at the £3 billion ship.
Well, weather conditions this morning couldn't have been more perfect for the delicate job of manoeuvring the 65,000-tonne floating city through the Solent and into the harbour.
Well, our reporter Richard Jones is live for us tonight in Portsmouth on the flight deck. Richard.
Well, welcome aboard the Navy's newest ship and her 4.5-acre flight deck. Now, she was built 500 miles away from here in Scotland. That means she was out of sight and out of mind of many people. There were always doubts about this project, and I always said to people, seeing is believing. And today, thousands came to see and maybe to believe. A calm sea and hardly a breath of wind. Just what they wanted for HMS Queen Elizabeth's arrival into her new home port. She started her short voyage in just before 7 o'clock. That meant an early start for the families of the 600 crew aboard, but they were never going to miss this.
Oh no, we won't miss it for the world. We've been waiting for this day for so long.
Very excited, we've got our flags, so we're all happy to be here.
Looking forward to seeing the ship and my fiancé.
On the way in, she dominated the flotilla of boats around her and towered over the homes of old Portsmouth. Her progress was what the Navy calls slow and methodical. Nothing was left to chance. She passed the round tower with a helicopter fly past overhead and a Royal Marine band on the jetty.
Absolutely fantastic. It's twice the size of them ferries.
That just exceeds expectations. So proud to be British.
Britain's had a navy for 1,000 years, and for almost all of that time, Portsmouth has been its home. But never in those centuries has a ship as big, as powerful, and yes, as expensive as this come into this famous harbour.
So this is truly, I hope you would agree, a proud moment for Portsmouth, for the Aircraft Carrier Alliance, for the whole Royal Navy, and for the United Kingdom. Today, we've shown the world how to welcome a new Queen to Portsmouth.
The people who decided we should spend £3 billion on this ship were there to see what our money's bought.
This is the biggest and most complex warship ever built for the Royal Navy. So to test her capabilities thoroughly and to make sure that her 17 million components are working as they should is a very big job.
Aboard, there was a huge sense of relief and pride to finally be home. Most of the crew are from the south coast, but they've spent the last 2 years commuting to work in Scotland.
Hugely exciting day, but one full of pride. Yeah, it's gone well, it's gone smoothly, and I'm glad we're alongside now.
I've never experienced anything like that before, to see the Portsmouth crowds come out and wave, and I know my parents were there somewhere.
When we saw the flotilla of small craft and obviously the people lining the shore, absolutely fantastic.
Portsmouth will get used to the sight of Queen Elizabeth. This is her home for half a century, but she's still sure to turn heads whenever she enters or leaves the harbour.
So Richard, what now for the crew?
Well, basically a well-deserved rest. In fact, I've just seen some of the sailors heading into Portsmouth for a run ashore. They've been aboard basically for 3 months now, getting the ship ready, getting her to sea and bringing her down here to Portsmouth. Ahead lies some leave, a chance to catch up with the family and friends. And many of those friends were among the thousands on the seafront in Southsea, welcoming her in this morning. Mary Stanley was with them.
They lined the seafront from Southsea to Old Portsmouth, filling the beaches and city walls. Many travelling from as far as Cornwall and the Midlands to witness this momentous occasion. Flags and banners were hung on the railings, residents and office staff watched from balconies. And for many it was an emotional moment as HMS Queen Elizabeth sailed past.
It's amazing. I'm one of the ex-shipbuilders and it's so great to see her come back.
Yeah. You're very emotional. What does it mean to you?
Well, we're at the home of the Royal Navy. She should be here. And it's just great to see all the good work that was put in, that she's here.
We come from Stenning, just north of Brighton, so we've come down quite early, didn't we?
Yeah.
Packed our bags, got the sandwiches, and we're so happy to be here. It's really great, really, really, really happy. We're so proud to be British today. It's absolutely brilliant, it really is fantastic.
The city laid on special park and ride buses for the expected crowds. Many arrived early to get the best view and watch the sunrise over the city. Tracy and Larry Richards were among the first to set up their deck chairs at 2 o'clock this morning, with a 5-hour wait before the ship's arrival.
I was down, see the Falklands go in, come out, come back, and also see the Iraq War team go out with pride and coming back with pride. You know, it really makes you feel proud when you see them sort of things, you know.
My father was on aircraft carriers during the war, so, you know, it's going to be wonderful to see this modern ship.
Binoculars were at the ready and flags were handed out as the ship sailed around the Isle of Wight and interview, and a flypast delighted the crowd.
Well, crowds have been here for many events over the years. The departure of ships for the Falklands War and the final journey of the Ark Royal and Invincible. And today, another big day in history, and thousands have come to welcome home the HMS Queen Elizabeth.
Wow, it's historic, isn't it? It was pretty hard getting up this morning, but I think she's pleased that we did get up and made it down here today. So
I think it's wonderful for the city as well. Portsmouth deserves it.
Today's arrival reinforces Portsmouth as home of the Royal Navy, and the tens of thousands in the crowd made sure the aircraft carrier and its crew received a warm welcome. Hooray! Mary Stanley, ITV News, Portsmouth.
Well, the shoreline wasn't the only place to get a good view of her arrival this morning. Many watched from the water.
Yes, Richard Slee joined passengers on a specially organised harbour tour, and as he now reports, those on board were more than impressed with what they saw.
This is what nearly 200 passengers paid £22 to see, an early glimpse of HMS Queen Elizabeth on her approach to Portsmouth. Everybody had a camera, and among these early risers were many Royal Navy veterans, delighted to see a big ship back in service.
Well, I saw her on the Eagle and the Hermes, and this one is similar. Looks like a proper carrier.
Absolutely superb, very British. Yes, excellent. It goes to show we can do it in the end.
I'm very impressed with it, and I'm sure it'll be very capable once it gets its jets on board.
The big carrier also attracted a large flotilla of pleasure craft. So many people wanted to be part of this memorable occasion.
It's wonderful. I'm glad I got up so early.
Yes, I was just going to say the same thing. It was worth getting up for, definitely worth getting up for.
My dad used to be on the old Illustrious and he's 98 and he still loves the Royal Navy, and you can't do better than this.
Travelling out to see the carrier was also a proud moment for Richard Clark, who's worked on the water in Portsmouth for 39 years.
After many years of being in the harbour and seeing the naval ships being depleted and now having a proper warship in the harbour again, so yeah, it's quite a good occasion today.
A decision to enter the harbour will be made before passing between the two outer forts.
A running commentary kept passengers informed of the ship's progress. And then the dramatic moment when she made her entry into the harbour and home. So an exciting first look at the Royal Navy's biggest ever warship, and it should be a familiar sight for some time to come. It's designed to be operational for 50 years. Richard Slee, ITV News, Portsmouth.
Back live to the flight deck now, and Richard in Portsmouth. Richard, is she actually in service now?
Well, not just yet. Today's been a major milestone, but there's still quite a long way to go. As you can see behind me, she's flying a blue ensign, not the white one. That means she doesn't actually belong to the Royal Navy just yet. She's here in the city probably until about mid-October to get some work done. Then she heads back out to sea for some more trials. Then she's back here in December when she'll be commissioned into the fleet. She gets her aircraft in the next few years, but she won't be fully operational until well into the 2020s.
Richard, thank you.
Well, HMS Queen Elizabeth weighs 65,000 tonnes, more than the weight of 370 blue whales, and she's 280 metres long, and that's longer than the Houses of Parliament. Her height of 56 metres makes her taller than Niagara Falls, and she can hold 36 planes, F-35s and 4 helicopters, and has a crew of almost 700. But she has the capacity for 1,600 people when she's on operations, and 13% of her crew are women. The flight deck is 4 acres in size, and it takes just 60 seconds to lift 4 aircraft from the hangar to the flight deck. And although she didn't need it today, the carrier's foghorn at 162 decibels is so loud it can be heard from 2 miles away.
More on the aircraft carrier later, but first today's other headlines. And a former Southampton Football Club youth coach appeared at Winchester Crown Court today. Bob Higgins, wearing a black hood, had been charged with 63 indecent assaults and 2 attempted indecent assaults against 23 boys under the age of 17 at a previous hearing. He had indicated he'd be pleading not guilty, but today, for legal reasons, the full plea hearing was put back until November. He spoke just once to confirm his name and was granted unconditional bail. Commuters are being warned of continued delays after a train derailed at London Waterloo yesterday. The train's now been moved, and while the track is repaired, one platform remains closed. South West Trains have apologised. A school minibus is among more than 100 vehicles captured on camera ignoring a new warning light on a level crossing in West Sussex. The red light camera was installed a month ago at the Yapton crossing. Dozens of drivers have been caught risking their lives, with some swerving round barriers just seconds before a train passes. A consultation is now underway that could see the half barriers replaced with a manual full barrier system.
Now, tomorrow, hundreds of thousands of students will be finding out how they fared in their A-levels. But lots of teenagers who sat more vocational qualifications have been celebrating for weeks.
Our social affairs correspondent Christine Alsford has been looking at the rise of the BTEC.
These students from City College are celebrating getting into the universities of their choice. Because they took alternative qualifications instead of A-levels, they've already received their results.
That was brilliant.
Thank you. How proud are you of yourself for how well you've done?
Very proud. Very proud.
And what are you going to do now?
Nursing. I'm doing a 4-year course that comes with a master's as well.
Both benefited after opting for courses with lots of practical work and ongoing assessment, which suited the way they learn best. And the creativity of Leon Clements Beale has won him a place on an arts degree.
I think it's definitely a lot better for those who aren't suited for exams. I'm very pleased with what I managed to do.
According to latest figures, as many as 1 in 4 students is now taking a BTEC, the most popular form of alternative vocational qualification.
Why do you think it is that students who pass BTECs just don't get the recognition that those that are passing A-levels and GCSEs do?
I think sadly it's mainly because of the way the results come out. There isn't a deadline date on which they're all issued nationally, and so there just isn't the same bulk of people getting their results on the same day to be recognised. So there just haven't been something that's been made a big noise about.
Carl Wilson is going up in the world with a job as a games designer. He has hands-on knowledge and experience from his 2 BTECs, but thinks there's still ignorance to overcome about how they work.
This is true. Yeah, not a lot of people have that much knowledge on what a BTEC grading system is. Just today at work, I blew in, so how did your grades go? And I went, oh yeah, I got MMP. And they're like, what? And it's like, yeah, merit, pass.
Josh Denham has gone down the apprenticeship route, which means he won't be waiting for A-level results either. But he is ending up with qualifications that are classed as the same.
With the apprenticeship, you learn as you go and you truly understand what kind of career it really is. If I went to college for a year or 2 years, it will get me an A-level. Doing this gives me an A-level just with hands-on experience at the same time.
Hi Carl, how's the CX workshop going?
It's going all right.
So while A-level students anxiously await the outcome of their exams later this week, for thousands of students who took a different path, the next stage of their journey has already begun. Christine Alsford, ITV News.
Artists are working on a permanent memorial to the 11 men who died when a vintage jet crashed during the Shoreham Air Show. Today, David Parfitt and Jane Fordham unveiled models of their designs for the first time. 5 pieces are being created, which will be installed along the banks of the River Ada.
We felt very strongly that we couldn't embody anyone's grief within an object. We couldn't interpret that for them. But what we could do, and what we felt was most appropriate, was to create spaces in order that people did what they needed to do.
And for more of the day's headlines here in the South, just go to our website, the address itv.com/Meridian.
The ITV Evening News continues with the national and international news at 6:30. And for news of that, here's Alistair Stewart.
Anger as Trump backtracks on condemning the fascism that prompted violence in Charlottesville, Virginia. Once again, he says both the far right and those opposing them must share the blame. Top Republicans and Theresa May say he's wrong. The crisis in care, more than 70,000 more places needed by 2025, but who'll provide them? And Britain's new giant of the oceans inches into her new home. We're aboard HMS Queen Elizabeth in Portsmouth. Join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
Back to our top story now, and the arrival today of HMS Queen Elizabeth and some more of the fascinating facts about her.
She has her own dentist, pharmacy, surgery and operating theatre.
She has fitness suites and a cinema too, and the sheer size of this aircraft carrier, she's got 17 decks, means the crew have to have handheld navigation devices to stop them getting lost.
The sophisticated radar system can track up to 1,000 craft or contacts in the air, spread over a 250-mile radius.
Well, Britain is one of the few countries in the world still constructing aircraft carriers. The sister ship to Queen Elizabeth, the Prince of Wales, is still under construction.
So why have we built her? And what is she for? Martin Dowse has been looking at the ship's role when she does go into operation.
Britain hasn't had a carrier with aircraft aboard since HMS Illustrious lost her Harriers in 2011, and we haven't had a carrier at all since she was decommissioned 3 years ago. Now we have one again, only helicopters on deck for now, but by next year fighter jets. Her role, they say, to project British power around the globe.
Every country does it in one way or another, whether that's economic, political, diplomatic or military power. And at a time when you've got Russia, China and many other countries projecting power at sea and from the sea, we have to be up there in the first division.
This was the giant US carrier George H.W. Bush visiting the Solent last month. The government and the Navy says our new carrier will allow us to do the work we've had to rely on the Americans to undertake on our behalf in recent years.
We would not have been able in the coalition to deal with Daesh terrorism in Iraq and Syria without the American aircraft carriers in the Gulf flying strikes. So we will have now that ability to be able to strike terrorists at any part of the world from the decks of this carrier.
They're 4.5 acres of floating airfield.
which we can place anywhere in the globe just about with impunity. We can move 500 miles a day, and we can either send off jets to attack targets ashore, or we can provide a huge amount of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief the following day.
But the development of the new carriers, a sister ship the Prince of Wales will be named in September, has been dogged by criticism, especially their price tag.
I think the negativity comes when people look at the cost and then they look at the systems on board and they know we don't have the aircraft to operate off it. It is a bizarre situation to be in. There's the whole of this sort of cart before horse I think people are concerned about.
Perhaps once she enters service with the fleet later this year, begins to go to work and is seen to be earning that price tag, some of those concerns will fade. Martin Dowse, ITV News.
And it's interesting to note that the world's newest carrier's home jetty is opposite HMS Victory, the world's oldest commissioned warship.
Well, let's go back to our reporter Richard Jones live on board the carrier in Portsmouth tonight. Richard, there is no doubt she is impressive, but there has been a lot of controversy surrounding her, hasn't there?
Well, there certainly has, and where to begin really? I mean, hugely over budget, late into service, aircraft not ready, and a shortage of the escort ships that are needed to protect her. Earlier today, I spoke to Admiral Lord West, the man who was in charge of the Navy when the carrier was ordered.
There are people who don't like the fact we have them. There are some civil servants, for example, who think, gosh, the danger with an aircraft carrier is it means we can be globally deployed, we can actually have impact around the globe, and they don't like that. No doubt in my mind that actually for the amount of money, I mean, these cost a fraction of the cost of an American carrier, a fraction of the cost of the Typhoon program, and yet it gives us incredible flexibility and capability.
Critics aside, though, there has been much celebration in Portsmouth today, where everyone seems incredibly proud to have her there.
Huge pride. I mean, everyone is speaking about it today in the city. Huge pride that this is her home. And she's also important as well here in the naval base because hundreds of people are employed to support the carriers, and they've played their part.
We've achieved something unique in maritime history, really, and the sense of pride amongst everybody involved is immense.
I'm also in the Naval Reserves, so I think having this huge change in the Navy coming into Portsmouth will be amazing.
This is a milestone in my career that I've probably been looking forward to for at least 10 years, probably more, and it's finally happened.
Well, I've followed this story for more than a decade. I was there for some of the key moments. Here's how the story unfolded. This was the moment the first steel was cut as workers at the BAE shipyard in Portsmouth started work building two sections of the carrier. Within 2 years, that first block, part of the hull, was placed onto a barge and sailed to Rosyth in Scotland, where the assembly of HMS Queen Elizabeth began. At the same time, work started on one of the most iconic parts of the ship, the forward island, from where the carrier will be controlled. That too left for Scotland and was lifted into place on the flight deck. But within months, there was bad news for workers at the shipyard.
The House will be aware that this morning, BAE Systems has announced plans to rationalise their shipbuilding business. Regrettably, that will mean the closure of the company's shipbuilding yard in Portsmouth.
The following year, I had my first chance to visit the ship and to stand on the flight deck, which was still a construction site. And then the ship was officially named by the Queen at a rain-drenched ceremony in Scotland.
I name this ship Queen Elizabeth. May God bless her and all who sail in her.
500 miles away, on a sunny south coast, workers who'd been involved in the project looked on. The following year, as fitting out got underway below decks, it was confirmed that Portsmouth would be home to Queen Elizabeth. £100 million was spent at the naval base to strengthen a jetty, dredge a deeper channel into the harbour, and build a new power station. I was back the following year, and by then almost all of her 600 crew were hard at work, and Queen Elizabeth was beginning to look like a ship rather than a building site. In Portsmouth, the pilot appointed to bring her into harbour for the first time described the challenge ahead.
The channel we need to take the ship through is just 100 metres wide. And that gives us, with a 40-metre waterline, being 30 metres either side, so there's very little margin of error.
In Rosyth, the carrier's first captain took command as one of Queen Elizabeth's predecessors, Illustrious, sailed for a Turkish scrapyard. Then, 2 months ago, Queen Elizabeth sailed for the first time to spend several weeks at sea on trials. 7 years, millions of pounds, one of the biggest engineering projects ever undertaken in Britain. Portsmouth played its part and will do for another half-century as home to Queen Elizabeth. Richard Jones, ITV News. Well, it's been a fantastic day and a huge privilege to be aboard, and here's my favourite fact about this ship. She will be in service for so long that the last person to be her captain hasn't yet been born. I'll leave that with you.
Thanks, Richard.
Now, if you haven't had your dinner yet, some of these facts about HMS Queen Elizabeth might make you feel a bit hungry.
Yes, she'll carry enough food for 45 days at sea, including 66,000 sausages and nearly 65,000 eggs.
She can generate enough energy to power 300,000 kettles. That's most of Portsmouth. And she can produce 500 litres of fresh water every day.
The carrier even has its own on-board bakery, baking 1,000 loaves a day.
It's only making me hungry. Well, on our Facebook page, almost 250,000 people have been watching her arrival over the last 12 hours.
And you've been getting in touch. Kelly March from Portsmouth said, I'm sat watching with my 3 youngest children and they are in awe of her, asking lots of questions. Makes me so proud.
Neil Witten from Banbury in Oxford says she's looking good. It's a bit pointless, though, without the planes.
And Natasha Winning from Portsmouth jokes, I wonder how many people were holding their breath that she wouldn't get stuck entering the harbour. Yes, indeed. Thank you all for getting in touch.
And we've got plenty more video on our website. Now let's see what's happening with the weather over the next few days. The details from Martin Stew.
Looks like we're in for a warm snap. P&O Dover Calais Ferries sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
Hello again, a cloudy start, but plenty of sunshine for the rest of the day. Very nice out there at the moment, though turning wet as we go into tonight. Tomorrow, well, a pretty dull start after the rain, but then fine and breezy as we go into the weekend. Here we can see the rain, which is working our way not too far away now, sticking around overnight and a bit tomorrow morning as well, so a dull start tomorrow. Friday, though, looking like a better day. Plenty of sunshine down along the south coast, and it's staying pretty fine through Saturday as well, though low pressure to the north of the UK, always in charge, so staying relatively breezy, with temperatures still a bit disappointing really for this time of the year. In fact, the first half of August has been the coolest first half of August for 30 years. Cloud building at the moment, and here we can see the rain starting to work its way in from 10 o'clock. The heavy stuff, though, more like midnight by the time it's fringing into the west of our region. Heavy in places and plenty of low cloud as well. Pretty breezy, pretty mild and pretty muggy. And then a pretty dull start to tomorrow morning. A fair bit of low cloud around. Some rain fringing along the south coast, though timings and exact positioning of that rain could well change overnight. As the day goes on, though, it is improving. The further north you are up towards Oxfordshire, more in the way of sunshine. But where we have more sunshine, we have a higher chance of triggering a few showers. So it gives with one hand, takes with the other. Similar temperatures tomorrow to those we've seen today, and a pretty pleasant evening in store, particularly more along the south coast, which is going to be staying dry. Then we look further ahead, and as mentioned, Saturday's got plenty of sunshine around into the weekend. A little bit more cloud, slightly more uncertain on Sunday, and relatively breezy too. Goodbye.
P&O Dover Calais Ferries sponsors ITV Meridian weather.
What a day it's been for the South, and what a day it's been for Portsmouth. From all of us on the programme, a very good night to you.
Good night.